everyone, my name is Heather Ulmer and I'm here today with the Strathmore Library to teach you a card class. This one specifically is all about Christmas cards, and so I hope we can get in the holiday spirit and have some fun creating these 3 cards. I'm going to show you everything that comes in your kit from the library when you check out the video on the iPad, as well as the reusable supplies and the supplies that are used up by you. So to start off with the reusables, we have got the stamp set here. This is by Wild Whisper, which happens to be a company that I co-own, and we work with some designers and do some designs ourselves. And this is the stamp set by Nicole Wright Designs called Baubles and Bits, and it is perfect for Christmas. It features this big 6-inch Christmas tree, lots of fun, this strand of lights, Christmas lights, a little pile of presents. This says, "Dear Santa, I can explain." We've got some little snowflake type fun embellishment things, a hanging snowflake, a hanging Christmas light, and a little long-necked kitty cat. So that is the stamp set, and I will be demonstrating how this works and how to use it, so not to worry. We'll take it slow and we will learn all we can. The other things in the reusables are this piece of acrylic. This is your acrylic block that your stamps are going to cling to, so it goes in combination with the stamp set here, and I will be explaining that further as well. We've got a little sponge, we've got some white glue, liquid glue, and our tape runner, and then we have a pair of scissors. We have our green ink pad. This has an ombre of colors from light to dark, and it opens up just like that. We're going to use this in combination with our stamp set as well. And then also in the kit, these you will be using up, I guess, but we are sharing these with all the kits, so be conscious of that and make sure you save enough for others. And then the things that you can use up fully, there are cardstock card bases for your cards. There are the Christmas sentiments that we're going to be cutting out to put on our cards, and we have a piece of jute rope as a decoration, and a piece of this glitter paper or glitter fabric that we'll use as a decoration on our cards as well. So these supplies you'll be using up. These supplies we'll be sharing between the kits. So we will get started into our first card. I'm going to actually get out my craft mat. This is just a messy surface that I like to work on, and it keeps the mess in one place, I find. So for our first card, we're going to take one of our 3 card bases. These are cut from a sheet of 8.5 by 11 paper, and it's cut in half, so the dimensions are 8.5 by 5.5, and that creates a standard size card when you fold it in half. So to fold it, we're going to take one sheet. We're going to line up the corners, and I like to place my fingers on that edge, and this is the folded edge. So we're going to just press down and use our fingers to press that into a nice crease. I'll show you again and fold the other 2 cards. So we, again, just line up our corners and hold it with your one hand, and then press kind of in the middle over here. So go up and press, and then spread the crease out from there. And we can just press it with our fingers. This cardstock isn't too heavy, so we don't need to score it in advance. But if you have a thicker cardstock, sometimes we do want to make a little score line, but we don't have the tools or the need to do that. So there we go. I have folded my 3 card bases and they're ready to go. So now you can use this card base as a top folding note card like this, or a side folding note card like this. So I'm going to do some of each, and you can decide which orientation you want to do for your cards. So I'm going to open up my stamp set, set my other supplies aside here. I've got my acrylic block handy, and I'm going to open this up. So we have to just undo this seal here. We don't want to ruin the packaging because I like to keep my stamp sets in the packaging. So we'll just pull this part out. You can leave the white sheet in there. And then we've got our stamp set here. So it comes with a backer sheet. So we can peel off this back sheet, which is just a clear sheet. Set that aside. Again, you want to keep that so we can keep our stamp set in its packaging to keep it nice and new. And then the designs are printed on this front sheet. So you'll notice when you peel off one of the stamps from the backer, this part is clear and this part has the actual design printed on it. So this is what it's going to look like when you stamp it, but because it's clear, we can see through the stamp. So I've got some scrap paper here, and I'm just going to demonstrate how we stamp our images. You'll want a very nice flat and sturdy surface because whatever's under your paper is going to affect how your stamping turns out. So I've peeled off this one large stamp, which is the Christmas lights, and we're going to place it onto our acrylic block just like that. You'll notice it clings, it sticks quite nicely, and it's not adhesive, it's just a cling stamp, so you can easily peel it off and reuse it and put it back on and put it back in the packaging, move it back and forth. But we do want to keep these stamps clean so they stay in the best shape we can keep them in. And I'll go over cleaning in a little bit. But when we have a brand new stamp like this, we want to condition our stamps. So that's when we get the manufacturing sort of surface off of them. We want the ink to stick nicely to the stamp itself. So I'm actually going to just stamp it onto my hand here like this, and that will help remove some of that finish from the manufacturing process. It will condition the stamp with the skin of my hand, and then the ink is going to stick better to our stamp. So you don't need to do this if the stamp has been used before, but if you're one of the first to use this set, you may want to do a condition like this, and that's just so you know if you're ever using another brand new stamp set. So our stamp is all conditioned, it's ready to use, and we're going to take our ink pad, remove the clear cover of it, and we're going to, let's see how we want to do this. I'm going to stamp it like this. I'm pressing down multiple times because we want to load up the ink as best we can. And you'll notice it's picking up the ombre of this ink pad. And so I've only inked up this much of the stamp because that's how big the ink pad is. So I'm going to flip it over, and I want the dark part of the ink pad to be in the same spot. So that's why I'm flipping it, and I'll re-ink this area, again stamping it up and down multiple times to get that ink picked up on my stamp. So this is what we've got, and we've got a little bit of working time before the ink will dry, but we do want to stamp it fairly promptly. So I'm going to place it down on my paper like this, and I don't want to jiggle it or move it in any way, and we're just going to firmly press down. If you want to put a bit of muscle into this, you can feel free to stand up and press down on it just with your knuckles or with the palm of your hand like this, but always being sure not to jiggle it around because that will get a double stamped image. So then once we've pressed the whole thing and we think we've got our ink transferred pretty good, we're going to lift from the edges, and you'll notice the paper sticks to the stamp. So there, mine just fell off, but sometimes you'll just need to gently press the paper to pull it off while you're lifting up. So we've got a pretty good impression there. This area is a bit light, so I didn't get my stamp fully inked up there, but I really like how that looks with the ombre. So this would be a great way to create a background. I'm going to actually practice my stamping a little bit more using this ink pad, and we're going to reload our stamp set. You can do what's called second generation stamping, so you can also, without re-inking this, place it down again on the paper, press down again. I might press a little harder this time just because I didn't get the perfect transfer that first time. And then we'll lift up again, and you can see it's much lighter for that second stamp. So not the technique you'd want to use for all of your stamping necessarily, but in many cases this can be a beautiful subtle look for a background, or if that's the look you're going for. Super fun. So to reload our ink, we're just going to do the same thing. Again, I want to keep the colors in kind of the same spot on my stamp set, so I'm going to ink it up really good. I'm pressing down quite firmly into the ink pad to get all that ink picked up. Again, flip it over and keep the dark area in the center of this big stamp to create that ombre. And we're going to stamp it again. Lay it down without jiggling, press firmly, and press down all the areas of the stamp. Lift by the sides and let that paper pop off. So that time I loaded up a lot more ink, and you can see it's a more colorful, bold image compared to that first one even. So lots of ways to use this. Practice your stamping on some scrap paper, either the paper provided if you want to use that, or some other just even printer copy paper. Stamp on that, see how it feels until you get used to it. Now when we go to clean our stamp, we can use a number of things. I really like to use a simple wet wipe like this. You can, and it's already damp, and it will clean up the ink really nicely. You can also just wash it with a bit of soap and water in your sink. Being careful not to drop the stamp down the drain. If it's a smaller stamp, we don't want to lose that. But you can do a wash like that. And we just want to remove all that extra ink. Then we can peel our stamp off of this block. You may notice it has a little bit of staining. So it's got a slight green tinge to it, and depending what ink you use, it will possibly stain the stamp. There you can see it a little better on that white background, and that's totally fine. The stamps are okay if they are stained. They still work perfectly fine. It's actually a sign of a high quality stamp when it stains a little bit, because that means the ink is being picked up really well by the stamp itself. So that's how we clean our stamps. You can use a wipe, or you can use some warm water and a little bit of soap in your sink. You don't want to use something like a paper towel necessarily, because that will leave little bits of the fiber from the paper towel on the cling stamp, and then when you use it again, those little bits of lint and stuff will stick to the stamp, and it will affect the impression that you're stamping. So we don't want that. If you are using soap and water, you can let it air dry, or you can use a towel that's not going to shed on it and just lightly pat it dry. And that is how we clean our stamps. So next we are going to get started on our card, and for the first design that I'm thinking of, I think I want to use this really big Christmas tree because I think it's just beautiful. So I'm going to take my card base. I'm going to peel up this next stamp. So you just start at one corner, get that peeled up, and then it's pretty easy to peel up the whole thing. We don't want to stretch it like this too much, so I just keep pulling up close to the plastic to keep our stamp safe from stretching. So we'll place that down on our acrylic block here, and again we'll need to condition our brand new stamp, so we'll stamp it on our hand like this. I also know some people like to rub it with a white eraser just to get it conditioned. I don't find that's usually necessary. I just like to stamp it on my hand. I've always got my hand handy. So next for this tree, I think I'm going to do dark at the bottom of the tree, at the base here where the tree stand is. So I'm going to repeatedly again tap it, and I'm moving it side to side so that, or up and down I guess, the way you're looking at it, it's vertical, to get those edges of the tree, and just pressing it, patting it into that ink pad. And again, I'm going to flip it so that the light color is together in the middle, and I'm going to do the same thing for the top of the tree. The ink pad is wide enough for this part, so I don't need to move it up and down like that. Another way some people prefer to ink their stamps is to hold the pad in your hand, pick it up, and do this to it, and flip the pad, so again the light color's in the middle, and pat it like this. So it's just a personal preference. I do both depending on my mood. So I'm going to take this tree. It's slightly bigger than our card, and so I'm going to line up the bottom, and maybe we can lay our card base flat like this so it doesn't pop up as much. I'm going to line up the base of the tree with the bottom of the card, and so it's sticking off just a little bit above the top of the card, and that's okay. And I'm going to press firmly again. I like to use my knuckles to press. You can press with the base of your hand, and if you need to put some more weight into it, feel free to stand up and press it. Just always keep one hand holding down the acrylic block so it doesn't lift and jiggle around. So when we're satisfied that we've got a good impression, there is an example of the paper sticking to the card, and just a light tap will press it off. There is our beautiful tree impression. So love that. We can fold our card back. There's what it looks like on the front. Very beautiful. Love how that turned out. And I'm going to show you another technique that we can do. So using the ink pad itself, we can just brush it along the edge of our card and just ink up the edges doing this. Love how that looks. Another way to do that is to use the sponge provided in the kit and dab the sponge into the ink pad to pick up a little bit of ink, and then it gives it a little bit softer of a look. So we can pick up light colored ink or dark colored ink. Most of what I've got on there is dark colored already, so I'll add a little bit of the lighter color. I like both of them on there, and that finishes off the edges of our card. Hopefully you can see that on the camera. So we're going to close up our ink pad, and the next thing I want to do to this card is choose which sentiment I'm going to put on it. And I think that I want to use this Merry Christmas one from the kit. So I'm going to use my scissors here and cut it out. I'm going to cut this one out straight. I'll show you other techniques for cutting out these sentiments for the next cards, but this one I'm just going to cut out in a straight rectangle, as straight as I can. If you want to sketch out a little rectangle using a pencil, that might be a good idea just so you can plan where you're cutting it out. But this is what it looks like when I've cut it out. And these bits, these scrap bits, can just go in the recycling. So we'll get those out of the way. And I'm going to use my sponge. I think it's already got some ink still on it. So I'm gonna just sponge the edges using that same technique, like so. And then I'm going to decide where on my card I want to place this. I think it would look good up here in the middle or down at the bottom. You can place it somewhere different than I am, but I think I will place it just kind of off to the side of my tree near the top here. And I'm going to use my tape runner. So this tape runner comes with a little thing to cover it up. So we're going to remove that. If the tape runner is brand new, you might have to get it rolling a little bit to get the adhesive right at the top. You probably can't see it on camera because it's very clear adhesive, but we're going to turn our piece over to the back and holding it like this, so with your finger on the top curve and your thumb down here, similar to how you'd hold a pencil, but of course it's much thicker. We're going to hold it at this angle and just run it along. And you can see, maybe you can't see, there, maybe you can, that I've added 3 little pieces of adhesive. You don't need to cover the whole thing, just a couple pieces will do. And then we can place this onto our card right there. And just a gentle press will make it stick. And you can see it's pretty firm on there. So I'm happy with that. And next for this card, I'm really excited to use these sequins, and I'm going to put some on the tree because they will fit perfectly in those little circles of the tree stamp. So again, we want to conserve the sequins because these are for everybody doing this class, and we are going to make sure we share, but I'm going to dump a few out here, and using my liquid glue, I'm going to open this up and I'm going to place a few dots of glue onto the tree where I want these to go. So, just placing a little bit of glue, and doesn't have to be much. It will dry clear, but we're just gonna add little dabs of glue onto there. We don't have to cover all the little circles. I'm just gonna do a select few and space out my sequins. I am putting one right in the center at the top, and then we can use our fingers to just pick up the sequins and place them into that glue. And I'm going to use all the different colors in here. You can use a specific color if you want, or do a pattern, whatever suits your fancy. So I'm just placing all the colors down. I'll put a green one in the center at the top there. Use another red one. Actually, I think I want a red one here. I'm going to switch them. Put red there. Now the sequins, you'll notice, do have a bit of a curve to them. So we want to, the way I like to glue them is to put, so if you picture them like a bowl, you want to put the bottom of the bowl into the glue rather than trying to glue it like this and the glue isn't going to touch the inside of that sequin. So that's how I'm placing my sequins, because they do have that curve to them. And I think that looks pretty good. There are my sequins on there, and you could decorate this some more with a black pen if you have that at home. You could add some doodles, you could add some little details to the baubles. I think I might do that using a black, just ballpoint pen. I'm going to add some stripes to some of mine. Maybe we'll do the next one vertical stripes. That's what's fun about this stamp set, is it invites a lot of creativity and you can really make it your own. I'm going to zigzag in this tree decoration. There. I'll do a little zigzag in that one. Just a teeny zigzag. Maybe I'll do some waves in this big one. Lots of fun. You can just play with this, add whatever sort of doodles you want to, or you can leave it without the doodles if you prefer that look. Whatever suits your style, and just be creative. Let's maybe do some that kind of waves in this one. I just think it adds a little bit of nice detail to our baubles and a little bit more contrast where our stamping might be kind of light. Some more simple stripes. So there is a closer look at the doodles I've done in there, and that finishes off the first card. So next I'll just tidy up. I'm going to again clean this stamp. You don't have to clean it immediately. It's fine to let it sit, but as long as we clean it up before we move on. So again, I'm just using this wipe. You could use warm water and a little bit of soap, and then dry it with something that isn't going to release those fibers onto it. Or again, just air dry it is fine as well. We'll peel it off getting our finger under one corner, and again, not stretching it, but just gently peeling it close to the acrylic block, or if you're peeling it off the sheet, peeling it close to the sheet. So we'll replace that on there, and we will move on to our next Christmas card. Okay, so for card number 2, we are going to use the smaller stamps. I'm going to start with I should show you on here so you can see better. This is the hanging Christmas light. It's actually upside down on the set, so it would fit, but this is what it looks like. It's the hanging Christmas light, and I'm going to put that in the middle of my block. And this card I'm going to do in a horizontal orientation, so a top folding note card. And so I'm going to lay my card down like this. Again, brand new stamp, we'll want to condition it a little bit on our hand. It doesn't take much and it's good to go. And I'm going to use my ink pad, and I'm going to do several of these. So I'm not going to worry about which end which color is at, because I'm going to do some of both. So I've got that inked up really well, and we're going to stamp it onto our card just like that, and press down and lift up. So there's our first light on there. Now I'm going to do a couple more, so I'm going to re-ink this really well in that stamp set, and I'm going to do it at a different height. So I'm going to have the string of it hanging off the top edge a little bit more, so that it looks like they're hanging at different heights, which I really like the variety of that. So there's 2 stamps. Now I want to actually clean this off because I want to switch where the dark color is. So I'm going to give it a little wipe, dry it off on my hand a little bit actually, and I'm going to flip it so that the bulb is at the dark end of the ink pad, and I'm just going to load that up, and we're going to stamp this one over here right next to that shorter one we did. Press down and lift it up by the edges, and there we've got a little bit of variety in there, which I love. So I think I'm going to leave it to those 3 bulbs, but I want to add in this other one from the stamp set. So I'm going to just clean that off before I return it to its package and put it back where it belongs there. And I'm going to peel off this guy. Again, we don't want to stretch it when we're peeling it, so we just peel close to the packaging. So this guy is the little snowflake that's hanging with a little bow at the top, and I think I want to do a couple of these. I'm going to make the snowflake at the darker end of the ink pad. So we'll load that up with ink, just pressing several times into that ink pad. And I'm going to make this one even shorter and put it beside that very first bulb we stamped, and then lift it off like so. So we've got a variety there, and I think I want one more snowflake in the middle. I'm going for a variety of looks here, so I want them to be all different lengths and vary where the color is. So this one has the dark color at the bottom again, and I'm going to make it as long as it can be. Stamp it down. So I've got 3 long ornaments or bulbs or snowflakes, whatever you want to call them, that are hanging long, and then 1 really short one and 1 medium length one. So I love how that looks. I think it's really fun. And again, we can add some pen to this if we want. So I think I'm going to actually just doodle on top of these. I'll close up my ink pad, get it out of the way. Before I move on, actually, I'm going to just clean my stamp, return it to the set. I like to try to keep my space tidy while I'm working, but doesn't always happen, so we'll do our best here. Set that off to the side, and I'm going to add a little bit of doodling. So I think I want the focus to be on the ornaments or the bulbs themselves. So I'm going to kind of outline just messily around those bulb pieces. I'll do that. So that's what it looks like. You can still see the ink around it, but it's got a more messy outline. And I'm going to do that. You can do it more perfect if that's the look you want. I like to do it a little bit imperfect. There we go. And for these snowflakes, I think I'll do a bow, but I'm going to make it offset from the actual bow that's stamped there. If you can see what I've done here, I've just added the detail around the stamp. So this one will do the same kind of thing, just like that. We could even add some of our own little snowflakes in here if we want to draw some snowflakes. Like that. A couple little ones floating around. Maybe one more up here. And they don't have to be perfect. I like them to be a little bit random. One more, I think. And then we can add some sequins up around the ornaments as well. And for this guy, I'm going to embellish it a little more than the last card. So I'm going to use part of my glitter paper, and I think I'll use the twine on here as well. And we're going to put one of our sentiments. I think the long one, Joy to the World, will suit this card because it's a horizontal orientation. So I'm just pre-planning that in my mind. But first, I think I'm going to ink the edges of my card like we did with the last one. So again, you can do the technique where you hold the ink pad in your hand, hold your card. I'm just being careful not to touch these because it will take a few minutes to dry. and I'm going to just ink the edges, going around, being careful not to touch it too much. So that time I used mostly the light colored ink. So when I go to use my sponge, I think I'll put my sponge in the mid colored ink. Again, you want to make sure your fingers don't have any ink when you're holding your card, because we're going to try not to get fingerprints on them. Sometimes it happens and we deal with it as it goes. We find ways to cover up the happy accidents or embrace the happy accidents. So there is what the card looks like so far. And I think I will cut out my sentiment. So I told you on the first card we would talk about other ways to cut out our sentiments. So for this one, I am going to cut it in mostly a rectangle, just to get it apart from the other ones so I have a little bit smaller of a piece to work with. But I'm going to cut around it like it's in a bubble. So this is called fussy cutting, and not everyone likes to do this because it is a little fussy and requires some patience, but I am just cutting. I'm imagining a border around my sentiment, and I'm cutting it with a slight white border. So we are using our scissors, and I'm cutting kind of far up in the scissors, you'll see, and I'm moving the paper more than I'm moving the scissors. So I'm using my non-dominant hand and kind of turning it as I go, as I'm slowly squeezing the scissors closed so that it cuts, and resetting every so often to keep my paper close to the end. I feel like you have a lot more control when you're cutting here in the scissors versus when you're cutting close to the tip of the scissors. If you're cutting just a straight line, it's nice to be able to use the whole blade like this so that you can cut a very straight line. But when we're doing something more detailed like this, I like to cut closer to the hinge of the scissors, like I said. So we're just taking our time with this. Go as slow as you want to. There's no rush. And we're just turning our paper to create that little white border. And if this is not your thing, if fussy cutting is too fussy for you, you can, again, just cut this in a rectangle like we did for the first card, or cut it with a bigger, thicker border in a thicker cloud, whatever you want it to look like. So there is our finished piece. I think it looks really cute like that. And here's our scrap. We can recycle those scraps. And I like to ink the edges of this too, so I'm going to take my sponge. And I like to use the sponge on smaller pieces because you can get in those little detailed spots versus using an ink pad. It will kind of glob up on the edges more, which I don't really want. So I've got a great spot for my sentiment down here, but I'm going to back it with some of this gold paper. And I think I want this in a skinny strip, so it looks kind of like a ribbon. So I'm actually going to cut this, and I'm going to use that technique using the whole blade like I talked about for cutting a straight line. And I'm going to keep my eye on this edge because I know that that's a straight edge. So I'm keeping my eye there and just watching my blade and cutting as parallel to that straight line as I possibly can. If you don't trust yourself to cut a straight line freehand like that, you can flip this over and using a pen or a pencil and a ruler, draw a straight line and then cut along it from the back. But I find this technique works pretty good for me. So I'm going to use that gold paper and I'm going to mount my word on top of it. Now I was thinking I would use this here as well, which you certainly could do, but I think I'll actually save this for the third card and put that on the third card. So I'm going to actually use my, I think the tape runner will work on this. I'm going to do a little experiment and see if the tape runner works, and I'm just going to put several small pieces of the tape runner on there. You don't have to cover the whole thing because we don't need that much adhesive on it. It will stick just fine. And it seems like the tape runner will work just fine on this. If you prefer, you could use your liquid glue, but I think this works fine. So we've got a little bit of extra here that I'm just going to trim off using my scissors, and I like to flip it upside down, and then I can easily trim right aligned with the edge of the cardstock there. So next we're going to add our sentiment, which I think fits really nicely with the way we have stamped these ornaments. It's kind of the same width, so I think that looks really nice. And again, I'm going to use the tape runner here and put just a few spots of adhesive on there. If you've got any adhesive sticking out the edge, you'll kind of want to use your finger and rub it off. It should come right off, but we don't want any sticking out because then it'll stick out and show on our card. So we're going to place that just overlapping slightly with the gold strip. Press that on there. Here is what it looks like, and you could add some more sequins to this like we did with this card, but I think I like it just with these little snowflakes I've drawn, so I'm going to leave it just like that. And this is the second card all completed. Okay, so for our third card, we have our card base here, and we are going to use some of our scrap paper this time. So I already did the practice stamping at the beginning on this scrap paper, but you can always use the reverse side or any areas you haven't stamped on yet. Feel free to use whatever other paper you need to if you've already done a bunch of practice stamping, not to worry here, but we're going to stamp on here because we're going to cut out the images. So I think the ones that I want to use for this particular card are these three little snowflake type shapes, I guess. These three stamps anyway, so I'm going to gently peel them off of here. And you may notice with a brand new stamp set, these two are a little bit conjoined, which is totally fine. We're just going to very carefully cut them apart and be sure not to cut any of the image. So we're going to place those on our acrylic here and grab that third guy and place him there as well. Now, because we're cutting these out, I'm placing them kind of close together to conserve paper, but I don't need to be super thoughtful about the order that they're in because I'll be deciding that later. So again, I'm conditioning the brand new stamps on my hand like so, and I'm going to use my ink pad to ink these up. And I think I'm going to use this technique, holding the ink pad instead of stamping these onto it, because I want them all to be this darker color. So I'm actually going to place the ink using that darker side. You could do the lighter side if you wanted, but this is my preference for this particular design. So we've got those all inked up in that dark color, and I'm going to stamp them onto my paper here, pressing firmly and lifting up very carefully. And they're not quite perfect, but that doesn't bother me. If you want to keep going, you can try to stamp them a little more firmly and add even more ink. But I'm going to stamp some more anyways, because I think I might want to use more than just 3 on my card. So I'm going to ink them up really well this time. Or even better, maybe. I thought I had them inked up pretty well. And I've made a bit of a mess of the ink pad, but that's okay. It'll wipe right off with a tissue or your wet wipe. Okay, and I'm placing them on there and pressing firmly again with my knuckles or the palm of your hand and lifting. And there we go, we've got some more images there. So I've got 6 to choose from. I think I'll probably use 5 of them just to use an odd number. Okay, so I'm just gonna wipe up my ink pad a little bit there. There we go. Put the lid back on because we're all done with that. We'll give our stamps a little clean here. And we'll put those away back onto our packaging. There we go. Okay, so we're going to use that same technique that I showed you on the previous card, cutting out the joy to the world, but we're going to cut out these little snowflake type things. So I just cut off all the excess to make it a little bit easier, and this particular design I'm just going to cut in a circle, and I will just again use close to the hinge of my scissors, and I'm turning my paper rather than cutting close to the tip of my scissors. There we go. And I'm going to cut this one off so I have even less paper, excess paper, and I'm going to cut a little bubble around it like this. I meant to mention when I was talking about this technique previously, if you want to draw yourself a pencil line to cut on as a guide, that can certainly help. If you're not confident in cutting out an even border all the way around, try to sketch it out first and draw it for yourself so that you have a guide to follow, if you feel like you want to do that. Okay, again, cut the excess off, and I'm going to trim this one out. Again, I'm just turning my paper back and forth, and we're going to ink the edges of these as well. I haven't quite thought about what my final design is going to look like, but I want to play with the arrangements on the card base. If you weren't a fan of cutting out the embellishments like this, you can always stamp them directly onto your card if you prefer to do that. But if you enjoy cutting things like I do, feel free to cut out as many or as few as you want. Maybe you only want to cut out one of these little snowflake shapes, and you are happy with that as an embellishment on your design. So do what feels right for you. The cards you create don't have to look exactly like mine. I always love to teach people that they can add their own flair, they can make mistakes and embrace them. Happy little accidents. So whatever design you would like is what you should do. So just move my scraps to the side. I don't think I'll use this last one because, like I said, I believe I want an odd number on here. So I have this gold paper still left over, and I think I'm going to make this card vertical in design, and I'm going to use my jute rope somewhere here. And I'm also going to use my Happy Holidays. So because I cut these out in detail, I think I'm just going to cut this one in a simple rectangle, add a little bit of contrast to the design. It's already in a pretty good rectangle for me, but I'm just gonna trim a bit off around those edges. That looks pretty centered. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to start with inking all my edges again. So I'll open up my ink pad, get the sponge out, and I'm using that darker color just to match the stamping that I've done. And if you wanted to add some more variety, you could have stamped these in the lighter color as well. Do some in dark and some in light, or you could do the ombre like what we've been doing for the rest of our stamping. Just add whatever little details you want to your card. But I like the way that this inked edge kind of finishes the look and makes it look a bit more purposeful. I'm going to, while I am at it, ink the edges of my card base like this. And that final folded edge, there we go. Put that back. Okay, so I think I will start with my gold paper here, and I'm going to add some adhesive at several increments along it. I've got this extra piece here, so I know I don't need adhesive there, but I'm just going to overlap each of the ends a little bit because the way my gold paper is cut, it's not perfectly straight. So I'm going to just trim off those crooked edges. And like I showed previously, you can flip it over to see your straight edge. Let's open our card up for this and just cut right along that straight edge on both sides. There we go. Again, move those scraps to the side. Now, I would like to add, I think I'll put this on the outside edge, and so I'm going to be using the liquid glue for this. I think, oh yeah, there. Had a bit of a glue gooby in there previously, so I'm just going to put this on the paper and put a line of glue right along the edge of this gold paper. And that is where I want my jute rope to go. So I'm going to lay this out into that glue, and we're going to have to let the glue dry a little bit before it's secure. So we want to be pretty careful with this. And I'm just going to press it into that glue. If you've got any seeping, you can wipe it away with your fingers or use a piece of scrap paper like this to just clean up the look. And I think I'm going to let it dry a little bit before I trim off those edges, because if I trim them off now, I'm sure it will just rip my jute rope out of the glue. So I'll leave it like that. And I am going to lay this out. So I was thinking, let's see, I think I want this kind of here. And I think I want the rest of these kind of coming up from it, but I do want to overlap the gold sparkly paper, and I might tuck one behind as well. Let's put this one in the middle actually. Let's see. So I'm just gonna play with these until I find a design that I kind of like. I think that looks pretty good. And I'm planning to add some sequins as well to the middle of these, but I'm going to glue it down first so that I can save my spot, I guess. So I want this one tucked underneath my Happy Holidays piece. Oops, I got a puppy hair in there. So I'm gonna put that one down before I add my Happy Holidays. And put that one there. Now I'm going to add this, and this piece goes onto the glitter paper, so I want to add a decent amount of adhesive so that it will hopefully stick to that glitter paper okay, and it seems to work. And add a couple strips to each of these ones now. Now this one is underneath, so I'm going to glue it first. And tuck it back there. And you'll notice I'm picking them up one at a time so I can remember where I had each one laid out, and I can put it back in the place where I had it. So that is what it looks like right now. And now I think I will add some sequins. For this particular design, I think I'm going to use all reddish pink sequins. There's red and a pinkish color in here, so I'm not going to use any green. If you wanted to do like a monochromatic look, all one color, green would look really cool. And this glue, I'm struggling a bit, it's kind of globbing out, but we can wipe any excess away. I'm also going to add a couple sequins that aren't on top of my snowflake pieces, so I'll just put the glue down for those. And I'm going to apply my sequins now so that I can see what it looks like before I decide if I want any extras. So I'm just going to pick them up individually, and like I described on the first card that we use sequins, they're kind of shaped like a bowl, so you want to put the bottom of the bowl into the glue, because if you turn them like an upside down bowl, they won't stick as well into the glue. Hopefully that's a good analogy that makes sense. And I've got a bit of excess glue on here, but it will dry clear, so I'm not too worried about it. And one final in the middle there. I could add another sequin here, but no, I think I like how it looks. So I'm going to leave it like that. Happy holidays, a really pretty card with some glitter and some sparkle. So next, hopefully this has dried. I'm doing this in real time, so it's only been a few minutes, but I think it's stuck down a little bit. So I'm going to carefully hold the edge of my card with a pinched finger and carefully cut off that extra jute rope, and do that on the same on the other side. So there we've got our final card all done right here. Let's close up our glue, close up our upside down, close up our tape runner. We'll put these extra sequins back in the bag for the next person to use. And here are the final cards that we created. The final set of 3 Christmas cards. So you can always add stamping to the inside of the card. I think that would be great. You can always leave room for a personal message to say Merry Christmas to your recipient and tell them a bit about how your year has been. Ask them about how their year has been. Write a personal note, whatever you like on the inside. I always like to sign my name and the year on the back of my cards, because then the recipient knows it is handmade by you, and when they save it and look back at it in the future, they can remember what year it was from as well. And it's a beautiful thing that they can display on their fridge or their mantle at Christmas time. Or you can keep these for yourself and display them in your own home, because that is pretty fun too. I think that's a pretty good idea as well. So thank you so much for watching this Christmas card class. I hope you enjoyed it and learned a few techniques. Again, I'm Heather, and this is for the Strathmore Library, and I really appreciate you being here and getting creative with me. Please reach out to the library if you have any questions for me. I would be happy to answer your questions or help you pursue card making further if you would like to. There are 2 other videos in this series that I'm doing, a hello card set and a birthday card set. So be sure to check those out as well when the library has them released. I'm not sure what order it's going in, but again, thank you so much for being here, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays.